I've been a search and rescue officer in the Appalachian Mountains for over 5 years. If my time in the deep wilderness has taught me anything, it's that the national parks aren't just empty trees and scenic trails. There are sectors in these mountains that are completely wiped off the official tourist maps for a reason. In our line of work, there is an old, creepy rumor whispered among the veteran rangers. They say that if you're deep in the thick woods at night and you suddenly hear the voice of someone you love calling your name, you never answer. I used to laugh at it, thinking it was just a stupid campfire story to scare the rookies, until something happened to me over a year ago. This happened during a solo 3-day patrol in an unmapped deep wood sector near the state line. My job was to check an old abandoned ranger station that had been dark for months. The first 2 days were peaceful, almost boring. Just the crisp mountain air, the rustle of dead leaves under my tactical boots, and the endless sea of pine trees. But on the third night, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, the entire atmosphere of the mountain completely shifted. I pitched my heavy-duty tent in a small, isolated clearing surrounded by massive, ancient trees. By midnight, a thick, unnatural white fog rolled in from the valleys, completely swallowing the moonlight. It didn't look like normal mist. It felt heavy, almost deliberate, pressing against the nylon of my tent. And then, the forest went dead silent. If you've ever spent a night outdoors, you know the woods are never quiet. There are always crickets, the rustle of small animals, the wind in the branches, or distant owls. But this was absolute, deafening silence. It was as if the entire world had been placed on mute. In my line of work, we know that total silence in the woods is the ultimate evolutionary warning sign. It means every living creature has gone into hiding because a supreme apex predator is in the area. My survival instinct screamed at me to put out my camping stove, zip the tent shut from the inside, and keep my hunting knife firmly gripped in my hand. I sat in the pitch black, listening to the sound of my own racing pulse. At exactly 2:15 a.m., the oppressive silence was broken by a sound that made my lungs freeze. It was a voice. It was coming from deep within the foggy woods, echoing through the thick trees. It sounded distant at first, muffled by the fog, but it was clear enough for me to recognize the exact tone instantly. It was my mother's voice. She was calling out my name, sobbing, sounding completely confused and terrified. She kept crying out that she was lost in the dark, asking why I wasn't coming to find her. For a single, frantic second, my primal human brain took over. I wanted to rip the tent zipper open, turn on my flashlight, and charge into the freezing night to save her. But then, a cold, violent wave of logic hit me like a physical blow. My mother was currently over 500 miles away, fast asleep in her warm suburban bedroom in Ohio. There was absolutely no physical, logical way she could be wandering the dangerous Appalachian wilderness in the middle of a freezing night. I forced myself to sit completely frozen, holding my breath in the darkness, clutching my tactical flashlight like a weapon. The voice called out again, but this time the distance had cut in half. It was just on the outer edge of my clearing now, maybe 40 yards away. But as I listened closer, the terror mutated. There was something profoundly wrong with the audio. The inflection was completely flat, devoid of real human cadence. It sounded like a corrupted digital recording, repeating the exact same phrase with the exact same artificial pauses, over and over again. And then came the footsteps. They didn't sound like a human walking on 2 legs. It was a heavy, irregular, four-legged thudding sound accompanied by the wet, sickening snapping of thick pine branches in the darkness. Whatever was moving out there was massive, and it was deliberately circling my campsite, stepping into the high grass just outside my field of vision. The air inside my tent suddenly began to change, turning foul and metallic. It smelled like a sickening combination of rotting copper, wet soil, and old decay. Suddenly, the voice changed again, shifting gears mid-sentence. It wasn't my mother anymore. It seamlessly morphed into the frantic voice of my childhood best friend. A second later, it shifted into the voice of an old coworker I hadn't seen in 3 years. It was cycling through every voice it had ever intercepted, testing them against the silence, trying to find the one emotional hook that would make me panic and open the tent. It was a library of stolen voices from previous hikers who had disappeared in these woods over the decades. I refused to give it what it wanted. I kept my eyes locked on the thin nylon wall of my tent, refusing to move a single muscle. Then, the ambient light from the fog was suddenly blocked out. A monolithic, towering shadow fell over my tent. Whatever this entity was, it was standing directly outside my door. It was impossibly tall, its physical height easily towering over the peak of my shelter. I could hear its breathing, a wet, rattling, hollow sound that filled the clearing. A soft, scraping sound began against the fabric of the tent. A long, skeletal silhouette with elongated, jagged fingers pressed against the nylon, slowly sliding downward. It wasn't attacking yet. It was testing the structural strength of the material, feeling around for the zipper, trying to find a way inside. The sheer panic was so intense I could feel the cold sweat dripping down my spine, but I knew that if I made a single sound, or if my flashlight accidentally clicked on, it would be over. At that exact second, the creature stopped mimicking the voices of other people. The scratching ceased, and the clearing fell back into that horrific dead silence. And then, it spoke one last time. But it didn't use a stolen voice from my past. It used my own voice. It sounded exactly like me, whispering from the other side of the thin fabric, less than 2 inches away from my face. It was my exact tone, my exact accent whispering into the nylon. The voice whispered, "I can hear your heart beating. Don't look back." A split second later, the sharp black claw of the creature tore a violent, massive rip straight through the top of my tent, exposing me to the freezing fog. I didn't think. I scrambled backward, firing my tactical flashlight directly into the tear. The beam of light caught a glimpse of something that text files can barely describe. A pale, elongated face with no eyes, just leathery skin stretched over an oversized skull, and a mouth that opened far too wide. The creature shrieked, a sound that was a horrific mashup of a human scream and a mechanical siren, blinded by the high lumen light. I used that 1 second of confusion to roll out from the ruined back of the tent, tumbling into the wet mud and the blinding fog. I ran. I didn't look for the trail. I just ran blindly through the trees, branches scratching my face, the adrenaline completely numbing the pain. Behind me, I could hear the heavy, chaotic crashing of trees as the creature gave chase, moving through the forest with terrifying speed, screaming at me using my mother's voice, then my friend's voice, then my own. I ran for what felt like hours until my lungs were burning and my legs collapsed beneath me. I managed to hide inside a hollowed-out fallen redwood log, squeezing myself into the tight, rotten wood, turning off my flashlight and praying to a God I hadn't believed in for years. I stayed there, shivering in the dark, for the rest of the night. Every few minutes I would hear the heavy thuds of the creature passing by, sniffing the air, whispering random names into the dark. When the first morning light finally broke through the Appalachian canopy, the fog cleared, and the regular sounds of birds and wind returned to the forest. I crawled out of the log and hiked 10 miles back to the ranger station in a state of complete shock. I quit my job the very next day. I live in a city now, surrounded by concrete and streetlights, as far away from the tree line as possible. But every time it rains and a thick mist rolls down the city streets, I lock my windows tight. Because sometimes when the apartment gets completely quiet at 2:15 a.m., I can hear a soft, familiar scratching on my bedroom glass, and a voice that sounds exactly like mine whispers from the darkness outside, telling me to open the window.